The summer breeze carried the sweet scent of honeysuckle through Willow Creek's winding streets, a familiar comfort that Kalia Turner had grown to depend on. At 25, she had mastered the art of routine: wake up early, tend to her small garden, work at the local library, and steadfastly avoid thinking about the past. But today, the whispers spreading through town threatened to shatter her carefully constructed peace. "Did you hear? Jasper Whitmore is back." The words floated across the library's reference section, where Kalia was organizing a stack of well-worn classics. Her hands froze mid-motion, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, hovering between shelf and air. 7 years of practiced indifference threatened to crumble in an instant. "They say he's taking over his father's business," the whispers continued. "Apparently, he's changed so much." Kalia forced herself to place the book precisely where it belonged, her movements measured and controlled. Her curly hair, falling in perfect coils around her face, helped hide the slight tremor in her lips. She smoothed down her floral sundress, her armor of sorts these days, and caught a hint of her daisy perfume, the scent grounding her in the present. "Miss Turner," a young patron's voice pulled her back to reality. "Could you help me find the science section?" Grateful for the distraction, Kalia led the way through the shelves, her low-heeled sandals clicking softly against the wooden floors. This was her life now: quiet, predictable, safe. She'd built it carefully after Jasper left without a word, brick by brick, until the walls around her heart were high enough to keep out any whisper of "what if?" But fate had other plans. The library's ancient bell chimed as the front door opened, letting in a gust of summer air and footsteps that seemed to echo through Kalia's memories. She didn't need to look up. Her body recognized his presence before her mind could catch up. The familiar scent of Sauvage by Dior filled the air, and suddenly she was 17 again, sitting in the Whitmore Gardens, watching fireflies dance, while Jasper promised her forever. "Hello, Kalia." His voice had grown deeper, richer, but it still carried that same warmth that used to make her feel like she was the only person in his world. Slowly, she turned around, grateful for the cart of books between them. Jasper Whitmore stood there, all 6'2" of him, commanding attention without effort. His black hair was styled differently now, shorter on the sides, longer on top, sophisticated in a way that spoke of European influence. His fitted navy suit couldn't quite hide the athletic build underneath, and his neatly trimmed beard gave him an air of maturity that almost made her forget the boyish grin she used to know so well. Almost. "Welcome back to Willow Creek, Mr. Whitmore," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "The business section is upstairs, second row from the left." Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at her professional tone. Good. Let him see how much had changed. Let him realize that the girl who used to walk barefoot through his mother's rose garden was gone. "I'm not here for books, Kaylee." The nickname slipped from his lips, like a habit he'd never quite broken. "It's Kalia," she corrected him, turning back to her cart. "And this is a library. If you're not here for books, I'm afraid I can't help you." He stepped closer, and she caught another wave of his cologne, mixed with something else. Determination, maybe. 7 years, and that's all you have to say to me. A patron nearby cleared their throat disapprovingly at their volume, and Kalia seized the opportunity. "Please keep your voice down, Mr. Whitmore. Some people are trying to study." "Have dinner with me," he said, lowering his voice but not his intensity. "One dinner. Let me explain." Kalia finally looked at him properly, allowing herself to see the changes time had carved into his features, the sharp jawline, the slight crinkles near his eyes, the way he held himself, like a man who had seen enough of the world to know exactly what he wanted. "There's nothing to explain," she replied softly. "You left. I stayed. That's the whole story. You know it's not that simple." He reached for her hand, but she pulled back before he could touch her. "Actually, it is." She gestured to their surroundings, the library where she'd rebuilt herself, book by book. "This is my life now, simple, uncomplicated. And I'd like to keep it that way." A group of high school students walked past, their whispers and giggles making it clear that tomorrow all of Willow Creek would be talking about this encounter. In a town this size, secrets had a way of becoming headlines by breakfast. "I never wanted to leave," Jasper said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "There are things you don't know, Kalia." She felt her carefully constructed walls trembling. "What I know is that you walked away without looking back, and I learned to do the same." She squared her shoulders. channeling every ounce of strength she'd built over the years. "Now, if you'll excuse me, these books won't shelve themselves." But as she turned to leave, his next words froze her in place. "Your father asked mine to send me away." The cart rattled as her hand jerked in surprise. A few books tumbled to the floor, the sound echoing through the quiet library like gunshots. Jasper immediately knelt to help her pick them up, and for a moment they were both on the ground, fingers almost touching over leather-bound spines. "You're lying," she whispered, but even as the words left her mouth, pieces of the puzzle started shifting in her mind. Her father's guilty looks in the months after Jasper left. The way he'd insisted she focus on practical goals instead of foolish dreams. "I only found out last week," Jasper continued, his voice gentle but firm. "When I came back and started asking questions, your father thought he was protecting you, protecting his job, your future. He convinced my father that sending me to Europe was the best solution for everyone." Kalia grabbed the last book and stood up abruptly, needing the physical distance to think clearly. "And you expect me to believe you spent 7 years never questioning why you were suddenly shipped off, never thought to call, to write, to ask why?" "I was told you wanted a clean break," he admitted, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. "That you had plans for your future that didn't include complications. My father showed me a letter." "A letter?" Her voice cracked slightly. "Supposedly from you, saying you needed space to focus on your goals." He pulled out his phone, fingers moving quickly across the screen. "I kept it all these years. I read it so many times the paper fell apart, but I took a picture first." He held out the phone, and Kalia saw her father's handwriting staring back at her, a perfect imitation of her teenage scrawl. The room seemed to spin slightly as she read words she'd never written, breaking a heart she'd never meant to break. "I have to close the library," she said suddenly, taking several steps back. "We close early on Thursdays." "It's Tuesday," Jasper pointed out softly. "Then we're starting a new schedule today." She turned away, unable to look at him anymore. "Please leave, Mr. Whitmore," she heard him sigh, then the sound of expensive shoes on hardwood. At the door, he paused. "I'm not giving up this time, Kalia. Not until you hear the whole truth." Only after the door closed behind him did Kalia allow herself to sink into the nearest chair, her legs no longer able to support the weight of revelations she never wanted. Outside, life in Willow Creek continued its leisurely pace. Cars passing, birds singing, people living their simple, uncomplicated lives. But inside the library, surrounded by thousands of love stories bound in leather and paper, Kalia Turner faced the terrifying possibility that everything she'd believed for 7 years might have been wrong, and worse, that the walls she'd built to keep her heart safe might have been keeping out more than just pain. The faint scent of sauvage lingered in the air, mixing with her daisy perfume in a way that felt like both a memory and a warning. Tomorrow she would be stronger. Tomorrow she would remember all the reasons why the past should stay in the past. But for now, she allowed herself one moment of weakness, one tear for the girl who once believed in forever, and for the man who had just walked back into her life carrying the truth like a key to a door she'd locked long ago. In the quiet of her beloved library, Kalia realized that sometimes the hardest stories to read are the ones where we already know the ending, or thought we did. The morning after Jasper's appearance at the library dawned with an unseasonal chill, matching Kalia's mood as she stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, evidence of a sleepless night spent reading and rereading the photograph of that letter she'd never written, stored now on her phone after Jasper had texted it to her. Her father's deception hung heavy in her chest. 7 years of believing Jasper had simply chosen his privileged future over whatever was growing between them. 7 years of teaching herself not to want more than what life had dealt her, all built on a carefully crafted lie. The sound of the coffee maker in the kitchen pulled her from her thoughts. Taking a deep breath, she smoothed down her high-waisted jeans and cream blouse, a far cry from the sundresses she used to wear in the Whitmore Gardens. Her curls were pulled back into a neat bun, another armor against the chaos threatening to unravel her carefully structured life. "Morning, sweetheart." Her father's voice greeted her as she entered the kitchen of their modest home. Richard Turner stood at the stove, flipping pancakes like he did every Tuesday morning, as if this was just another day, as if her world hadn't tilted on its axis yesterday. "Is it true?" Kalia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you write that letter to the Whitmores?" The spatula clattered against the stovetop. Her father's shoulders tensed, then dropped in resignation. He turned slowly, his weathered face showing every one of his 55 years. "I did what I had to do to protect you," he said finally, his eyes pleading for understanding. "You were just a girl with stars in your eyes, and he was a boy who cared about me," Kalia finished, her voice trembling. "And you took that choice away from both of us." Richard moved to the kitchen table, sinking heavily into a chair. "The Whitmores, they live in a different world, Kalia. I've worked in their gardens for 20 years. I've seen how their kind treats people like us, like we're disposable. Jasper was different," she insisted, even as the words felt like glass in her throat. "Maybe he was," her father conceded, "but his family wasn't. And one day, he would have had to choose between their world and ours. I couldn't watch you get your heart broken when that day came. So you broke it yourself instead." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, a lawnmower roared to life, probably Mrs. Henderson starting her Tuesday routine. Life in Willow Creek moved on, oblivious to the earthquakes happening behind closed doors. "I'm sorry," Richard finally said, his voice rough with emotion. I thought you'd move on, go to college, find someone more suitable." Kalia grabbed her bag from the counter. "I have to go. The library opens in 30 minutes. Kylie, please." But she was already out the door, the screen slamming behind her with a finality that echoed through the morning air. The walk to work, usually her time to plan her day and enjoy the town's quiet beauty, became a blur of familiar faces and concerned looks. News traveled fast in Willow Creek, and yesterday's library scene had undoubtedly made the rounds. She was so lost in thought she almost collided with someone outside the coffee shop. Strong hands steadied her, and the now familiar scent of sauvage filled her senses. "Careful there." Jasper's voice was warm with amusement. "Though I have to admit this is better than yesterday's welcome." Kalia stepped back quickly, straightening her blouse. "I'm late for work. It's 7:15. The library doesn't open until 8 hours. He held up 2 coffee cups. "I was actually bringing this to you. Peace offering." She should say no, should walk away and maintain the boundaries she'd spent years building. Instead, she found herself accepting the cup, the warmth seeping through her fingers. "How did you remember?" she asked, smelling the distinctive aroma of vanilla and cinnamon. "Some things you don't forget," he replied simply. "Like how you take your coffee, or how your eyes get darker when you're trying not to cry." "I'm not crying." "No," he agreed softly. "You're angry. I saw the same look in the mirror this morning after I visited my father." That caught her attention. "You confronted him?" Jasper's jaw tightened, his free hand running through his hair in that familiar gesture of frustration. "Sass, let's just say the Whitmore mansion won't be hosting any peaceful family dinners anytime soon." A couple of teenagers walked past, phones out, not even trying to hide their interest in the scene unfolding before them. Kalia took a step toward the library. "We can't do this here," she said, glancing meaningfully at their growing audience. "Have breakfast with me," Jasper suggested. "Not as a date, just as 2 people who deserve the truth about their own lives." The rational part of her brain screamed at her to decline, but another part, the part that still remembered the taste of first love and summer dreams, made her nod. "There's a back room in the library," she found herself saying, "for private research. We can talk there." 10 minutes later, they sat across from each other at a small table, morning light streaming through high windows. Jasper had loosened his tie, his suit jacket draped over the chair. Even in corporate armor, he carried himself with the same easy grace she remembered. "My father claimed he was doing what was best for the family," Jasper began, his coffee untouched. Said a youthful indiscretion was one thing, but letting it continue would have been irresponsible. "Irresponsible," Kalia repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. Because I was the gardener's daughter." "Because you made me question everything," he corrected. "The lifestyle, the expectations, the perfectly planned future. You made me want something real." "And now?" she couldn't help asking. "What do you want now?" Jasper leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "The truth, all of it. 7 years of missing pieces and what-ifs. And then we decide if what we lost is worth fighting for." The library's old heating system kicked in with a groan, making them both jump. Reality crashed back in. She had a job to do, he had a company to run, and they weren't teenagers in a garden anymore. "I have to open the library." Kalia stood, gathering her composure around her like a shield. "This doesn't change anything, Jasper. We can't go back." "I'm not asking to go back," he said, rising as well. "I'm asking if we can go forward. Different people." Eyes wide open this time. Before she could respond, a knock at the door announced the arrival of her co-worker, Melody. "Kalia," There's already a line outside. Coming, she called back, grateful for the interruption. Turning to Jasper, she added, "Thank you for the coffee." He caught her hand as she passed, the touch sending electricity through her veins. "Have dinner with me tonight. Neutral Ground, that new place on Main Street. Let me tell you everything I learned about that summer." The smart answer would be no. The safe answer would be no. But Kalia was tired of building her life around other people's choices. 8 o'clock, she said finally. "Don't be late." As she walked to the front desk, straightening books and turning on computers, Kalia felt Jasper's presence behind her, moving toward the exit. Just before he reached the door, he paused. "I missed you, Kylie," he said softly, meant for her ears alone. "Every single day." Then he was gone, leaving behind the scent of his cologne and questions that had waited 7 years for answers. Kalia touched her phone in her pocket, feeling the weight of that forged letter like a stone. Tonight, she would learn the whole truth. Tonight, she would face the past that both their fathers had tried to bury. And maybe, just maybe, she would finally understand why some loves refuse to stay in the pages of memory, no matter how carefully you try to close the book. But for now, there were books to be shelved, patrons to help, and a whole day of pretending her heart wasn't counting the hours until 8 o'clock. After all, she had learned one thing in 7 years. Life doesn't stop for love stories, even when they refuse to end. 8 o'clock arrived with the precision of a metronome, and Kalia found herself standing outside The Grove, Willow Creek's newest restaurant. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, warm lighting cast a golden glow onto the sidewalk, making the evening feel almost dreamlike. She smoothed down her navy silk dress, a rare splurge she'd been saving for a special occasion, and caught a whiff of her daisy perfume, a familiar comfort in an increasingly unfamiliar situation. "You look beautiful," Jasper's voice came from behind her, and she turned to find him approaching, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit that spoke of European tailoring. His presence seemed to draw the attention of everyone on the street, but his eyes were fixed solely on her. "You're exactly on time," she noted, trying to keep her voice steady. "Some habits die hard," he smiled, opening the door for her. "Like always being punctual when it matters." The maitre d' led them to a secluded corner table, partially hidden behind an elegant arrangement of local wildflowers. Kalia couldn't help but wonder if Jasper had requested this specific spot, away from the prying eyes of Willow Creek's gossip-hungry population. "I took the liberty of ordering wine," Jasper said as they settled into their seats. "Oh, it's the Pinot Noir you used to love. You remember that?" "I remember everything, Kaylee." His dark eyes held hers across the table, like how you used to steal sips from my glass at summer parties, thinking no one noticed. The arrival of their wine interrupted the moment, giving Kalia a chance to gather her thoughts. Once they were alone again, she took a deep breath. "You said you learned more about that summer," she began, fingers tracing the stem of her wineglass. "About why they sent you away." Jasper's expression hardened slightly. "It was more calculated than we thought. My father had been planning to send me to Europe for months. He just needed the right moment, the right reason, and my father gave it to him. Your father gave him the perfect excuse." Jasper took a sip of his wine, but there was more to it. "The company was in trouble back then, nothing serious, but enough to worry the board. My father needed to secure a merger with Henderson Industries." Kalia's breath caught. "The Hendersons? As in Victoria Henderson's family?" "Yes." Jasper's voice was tight. "The merger came with certain expectations, including a potential marriage alliance down the line." The weight of this revelation settled over their table like a heavy cloud. Victoria Henderson had been the golden girl of Willow Creek, beautiful, wealthy, and from the right family, everything Kalia wasn't. "Did you know?" she asked quietly. "About the arrangement?" "Not until much later." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "By then I was buried in business school, trying to be the son my father wanted. But I never—" He paused, withdrawing his hand as their server approached with appetizers. Once they were alone again, Kalia forced herself to ask, "Did you and Victoria?" "No," Jasper said firmly. "We dated briefly, more for appearances' sake than anything else. But my heart wasn't in it. It was somewhere else, with someone else." The intensity of his gaze made her look away. "A lot can change in 7 years. Some things don't." He leaned forward. "When I finally discovered the truth about that summer, about the letter, about all of it, I ended everything. The arranged merger plans, the expectations, all of it. I came back here not just to confront our fathers, but to find you. Why now? The question that had been burning inside her finally escaped. 7 years. Jasper. 7 years of silence. Because I was a fool, he admitted. Because I believed the lie that you wanted to move on. Because I thought if I became successful enough, powerful enough, I could come back and prove everyone wrong. But by then, years had passed. And pride. He ran a hand through his hair. Pride is a terrible reason to stay away from someone you love. The word love hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Their main courses arrived. Grilled salmon for her, steak for him, providing another welcome interruption. I found this in my father's study, Jasper said after a while, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. It's the original letter, the one your father wrote, but there's more. He placed another envelope beside it. This is a letter I wrote to you, the week after I left. A letter that was never delivered. Kalia's hands trembled as she reached for the second envelope. The paper was aged, the corners worn, as if it had been handled many times over the years. My father intercepted it, Jasper explained softly. He thought a clean break would be better for everyone. No messy goodbyes, no promises to wait. She opened the letter carefully, her heart racing as she recognized his younger self in the hurried handwriting. Dear Kaylee, they're sending me to Europe tomorrow. Father says it's a great opportunity, but all I can think about is you, about last night in the garden, about the promises we made. I don't care what anyone says, we'll find a way. 2 years in business school isn't forever. Wait for me, I love you. I should have said it last night, but I thought we had more time. Jasper. A drop of water fell onto the paper, and Kalia realized she was crying. She quickly wiped her eyes, grateful for waterproof mascara. I wrote to you every week for 3 months, Jasper continued, his voice rough with emotion. Until my father finally showed me your supposed letter, saying you needed space. After that, he took a long drink of wine. After that, I tried to become who they wanted me to be, the perfect heir, the businessman, the society catch, but it never felt real. Nothing felt real after you left, Kalia admitted. I built this whole new life, thinking you had chosen your world over. She gestured vaguely between them. Over us, he finished. Never. If I had known, we can't change the past, she said, though the words felt hollow. No, but we can choose our future. Jasper's hand found hers again, and this time she didn't pull away. I'm not that boy anymore, Kaylee. I'm not letting anyone else make my choices for me. The restaurant had begun to empty, the evening winding down around them. Through the windows, Kalia could see stars appearing in the darkening sky, the same stars they used to watch from the Whitmore Gardens. What are you saying, Jasper? I'm saying, I want to know who you are now. The woman who built herself up from heartbreak, who made her own way. I want to know what makes you laugh and what makes you cry, what dreams you've built in the time we lost. His thumb traced circles on her palm. And I want you to know me. Not the heir, not the businessman, but the man I've become. No secrets this time. No lies. Just us, figuring out if what we feel is still real. The warmth of his hand, the sincerity in his eyes, the familiar yet new scent of his cologne, it all threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained defenses. And if it is, she whispered, if it's real, then we fight for it. Together this time, he smiled, and for a moment, she saw echoes of the boy who used to sneak her into fancy parties and dance with her under the stars. What do you say, Kaylee? Ready to scandalize Willow Creek all over again? Despite everything, the pain, the lies, the years of trying to forget, Kalia found herself smiling back. You always did know how to make an entrance. Is that a yes? She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 7 years lifting from her shoulders. It's a, let's see where this goes, one day at a time. I can work with that. Jasper signaled for the check, his eyes never leaving hers. Starting tomorrow, she agreed, and for the first time in 7 years, tomorrow felt like a promise, rather than a threat. As they stepped out into the cool evening air, Kalia knew that by morning, all of Willow Creek would be talking about their dinner, but for once, she didn't care. Sometimes the best stories are the ones that take you by surprise, even when you think you know the ending. And sometimes, just sometimes, what looks like an ending might really be a new beginning. Morning arrived with the subtle buzz of a text message. Kalia rolled over in bed, squinting at her phone's bright screen to find Jasper's name lighting up her notifications. Coffee. The old spot by the lake? 7 a.m. She smiled despite herself, remembering how they used to meet at Dawn's Edge Cafe during high school. Back then, It had been their secret hideaway, far enough from both their homes to feel like neutral territory. Now, it felt like a deliberate choice, a way to bridge their past and present. "See you there," she typed back before she could overthink it. An hour later, Kalia walked along the lakeside path, wearing high-waisted black pants and a cream silk blouse that caught the morning breeze. The early summer air carried the scent of water lilies and fresh coffee from the cafe ahead. She'd taken extra care with her curls today, letting them fall naturally around her shoulders instead of containing them in her usual work-appropriate bun. Dawn's Edge hadn't changed much in 7 years. The same weathered wooden deck, the same mismatched chairs, the same spectacular view of Willow Creek Lake. What had changed was the man waiting at their old table, reading something on his tablet with intense concentration. "Working already?" Kalia asked as she approached. Jasper looked up, his face breaking into a warm smile that made her heart skip. He was dressed more casually today, dark jeans and a light blue button-down with rolled sleeves, revealing strong forearms marked by an expensive watch. "Actually, I was reading about you," he said, turning his tablet to show her an article on the local news site, Community Spotlight, Willow Creek Library's Revolutionary Children's Program. Kalia felt her cheeks warm as she sat down. "That was last year. We started offering evening reading sessions for working parents. The article says it was your idea." He studied her with genuine interest. "You've been busy while I was away." "Life doesn't stop just because—" She trailed off, saved by the arrival of their drinks, her vanilla cinnamon latte and his black coffee, exactly as they used to order. "Because someone leaves," Jasper finished her thought, thanking the server. "No, it doesn't. But some things stay with you anyway." The intensity of his gaze made her look away, out toward the lake where early morning rowers cut clean lines through still waters. "Yesterday's revelations don't magically fix everything, Jasper." "I know." He leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "But they change things, don't they? Knowing it wasn't what we thought." Before she could respond, a sharp voice cut through the morning calm. "Jasper, I thought that was your car outside." Victoria Henderson stood at the entrance to the cafe's deck, looking every inch the society princess in designer workout wear, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the just-finished my morning run appearance she was clearly going for. Her eyes moved from Jasper to Kalia, then back again, a slight frown marring her features. "Victoria," Jasper acknowledged, his tone polite but cool. "Early morning workout. Daddy always says the early bird catches the worm?" She moved closer, uninvited. "Speaking of Daddy, he was quite surprised by your announcement yesterday about the merger." Kalia felt tension creep into her shoulders. This was exactly the kind of situation she'd wanted to avoid, the collision of Jasper's world with hers. "I'm sure he was," Jasper replied evenly, "but my decision is final." Victoria's perfect smile didn't waver. "So things change, darling. You know how business is." Her gaze slid to Kalia. "Although I see some people never change at all, still hanging around the edges of worlds they don't belong in." "Victoria?" Jasper's voice carried a warning note. "Actually," Kalia stood, gathering her dignity around her like armor. "I need to get to work. The library opens in an hour." "Carly, wait." Jasper rose as well, but Victoria smoothly stepped between them. "Oh, let her go, Jasper. We have so much to catch up on, like how you're planning to explain to the board why you're throwing away years of careful planning over what exactly." Kalia didn't wait to hear his response. She walked away quickly, her heels clicking against the wooden deck, then the stone path. Behind her, she heard Jasper call her name again, but she didn't turn around. This was exactly why their fathers had interfered 7 years ago, because their worlds were never meant to intersect. She was halfway to the library when rapid footsteps behind her made her turn. Jasper jogged up, slightly out of breath. "You're getting slow," she said before she could stop herself, remembering how he used to run track in high school. 7 years of business meetings will do that," he smiled, falling into step beside her. "Want to tell me why you ran?" "I didn't run. I walked purposefully." "Kaylee," she stopped, turning to face him. "That's why, Jasper, that right there. The fact that you can just walk away from Victoria Henderson and the merger and your father's plans like none of it matters. But it does matter. Your world has consequences." "Our world," he corrected. "I'm not asking you to fit into some society mold, Kaylee. I'm asking for a chance to build something new, something that's ours." A group of early morning joggers passed them, phones out, probably already posting about the scene they were witnessing. In a town like Willow Creek, privacy was a luxury neither of them could afford. "You can't just demolish your life for a maybe," Kalia said softly. "The merger, your father's plans. Watch me." His voice was firm. "I spent 7 years building a life I thought I was supposed to want. But you know what I realized when I found that letter? That success means nothing if you're living someone else's dream." A cool breeze swept off the lake, carrying the scent of his cologne, that familiar mix of sauvage and something uniquely Jasper. It made her think of summer nights and stolen kisses, of promises made under starlight. "I have a life here," she said finally. "A simple one, but it's mine. I built it careful and slow, brick by brick. I'm not asking you to tear it down." He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I'm asking if there's room in it for me. The real me, not the heir or the businessman, just me." The early morning sun caught his face, highlighting the earnestness in his expression. For a moment, she saw both versions of him, the boy who used to make her laugh and the man who was willing to fight for what he wanted. "People will talk," she warned. "People already talk. It's Willow Creek." His smile turned mischievous. "Remember what you used to say about gossip?" Despite herself, Kalia felt a smile tugging at her lips. "That if they're going to talk anyway, we might as well give them something worth talking about." They finished together. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. Finally, Kalia took a step back, creating necessary distance. "I really do have to get to work," she said, "but maybe we could talk more later." "Dinner again," he suggested. "My place this time, away from prying eyes and unexpected interruptions." Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a bad idea. But her heart, her traitorous, hopeful heart, had other plans. "Text me the address," she heard herself say. "I'll bring dessert." His smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. "Just like old times, your famous raspberry chocolate cake. You remember that?" "I remember everything about you, Carly." He reached out, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. Every single detail. As she walked the rest of the way to the library, Kalia could feel the weight of curious stares following her. By noon, all of Willow Creek would know about her breakfast with Jasper, about Victoria's appearance, about their conversation on the street. But for the first time in 7 years, she didn't care what anyone thought. Maybe it was time to stop being the careful, predictable person she'd forced herself to become. Maybe it was time to remember the girl who used to believe in impossible things, like love that could bridge any gap and hearts that could find their way home no matter how far they'd wandered. After all, she thought as she unlocked the library doors, some stories are worth risking everything for. Even if you don't know the ending yet, the address Jasper texted wasn't what Kalia expected. Instead of the Grand Whitmore mansion or some luxury downtown apartment, she found herself driving to the outskirts of Willow Creek, where modern houses dotted the hillside overlooking the lake. As she pulled up to a contemporary glass and stone structure, she noticed it was modest by Whitmore standards, beautiful but not ostentatious. Kalia checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting the simple gold necklace that complemented her deep burgundy wrap dress. The raspberry chocolate cake sat carefully boxed in the passenger seat, still warm from the oven. She'd spent the afternoon baking it in her tiny kitchen, trying not to think about how many times she'd made this same recipe for him years ago. Before she could reach the door, it opened. Jasper stood there in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made his eyes look almost black in the evening light. The sight of him so casual, so at home, made her heart skip. "So you found it?" he smiled, stepping aside to let her in. "It's not what I expected," she admitted, taking in the open-plan living space with its wall of windows overlooking the lake. "You mean it's not the mansion?" His tone was knowing. "I bought this place last week. My first real decision since coming back. The interior was warm and inviting, modern furniture in neutral tones, shelves filled with books, and to her surprise, a few framed photographs she recognized from their youth. One in particular caught her eye, the two of them at the town's summer festival, both laughing at something long forgotten. "Your mother took that picture," Jasper said softly, following her gaze. "On the night before you left," she finished. Setting down the cake box, she moved closer to the photo. "We were so young enough to believe love could conquer anything." He moved to the kitchen, where something delicious was simmering. "Hungry? You cooked?" She couldn't hide her surprise. "Another skill I picked up in Europe." He lifted the lid off a pot, releasing the aroma of herbs and wine. "Coq au vin. I remembered how much you loved French cuisine." When we used to sneak into that little bistro downtown, she smiled at the memory, you'd convince them to let us try the chef's specials. And you'd describe every flavor like you were writing poetry. He poured 2 glasses of wine, handing her one. You still do that? Get lost in the details of things you love. The question carried weight beyond food preferences. Kalia took a sip of wine to buy herself time. I've learned to be more practical. That's not an answer. Neither is buying a house your first week back in town. Jasper's laugh was unexpected and genuine. Touché, but at least I'm being honest about my impulsive decisions. He moved around the kitchen with easy confidence, plating their dinner while she watched. Everything about this scene felt surreal. Jasper Whitmore cooking her dinner in his new home, talking about the past like it was a bridge instead of a wall between them. Why this house? She asked, as they sat at the dining table, the lake view darkening into twilight before them. Why not stay at the mansion? Because it's mine, he said simply. Not my father's, not the family's, just mine. And, he hesitated, then pushed forward, because it reminded me of those plans we used to make. A house by the lake, away from everything. Remember? Of course she remembered. They'd spent countless hours dreaming up their future, sketching house plans on napkins, picking out imaginary furniture. She'd thought those dreams had died 7 years ago. Jasper, I'm not saying I bought it because of that, he added quickly. I'm saying, maybe some dreams stay with you. Shape your choices even when you're not conscious of it. The food was excellent, but Kalia barely tasted it. Her mind was spinning with implications, with possibilities she'd forced herself not to consider for years. What happened with Victoria today? She asked finally. After I left, Jasper set down his fork. She tried to convince me I was making a mistake. Told me her father would never approve another merger attempt if I walked away now. And that doesn't worry you, should it? His gaze was steady. The merger was never about business, Kaylee. It was about control. My father's way of ensuring I stayed on his chosen path. By marrying you off to Victoria Henderson? By making me believe that was my only option. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. But it's not. It never was. The touch sent electricity through her veins, awakening feelings she'd thought long buried. We're not teenagers anymore, Jasper. We can't just what? Choose our own path, fight for what we want. His voice was soft but intense. Why not? Before she could answer, a crack of thunder made them both jump. Rain began to pelt the windows, sudden and heavy, as only summer storms can be. Perfect timing, Jasper smiled, standing. Come on, there's something I want to show you. He led her to a sliding door that opened onto a covered deck. The rain created a curtain of water around them, but they stayed dry under the overhang. The lake below was a dark mirror reflecting the storm clouds, broken occasionally by flashes of lightning. I used to watch storms like this in Europe, Jasper said, leaning against the railing. They always made me think of you. Why? Because you loved them. You used to say they made you feel alive, like nature was reminding us how small our problems really were. Kalia moved to stand beside him, close enough to smell his cologne mixing with the rain-fresh air. I still love storms. What else? He turned to face her. What else stayed the same? What changed? 7 years is a long time to wonder. The intimacy of the moment, the rhythm of the rain, the way his eyes seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed walls, it all conspired to make her honest. I still read romance novels but pretend I don't, she admitted. I still drink too much coffee and stay up late stargazing. I still believe in happy endings, even though I try not to. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face as he moved closer. What changed? I learned to be careful with my heart, to build walls before bridges, She took a shaky breath, to stop waiting for someone to come back. And now? His voice was barely above a whisper. Now that I'm here, the thunder rolled overhead, nature's percussion to the rhythm of her heartbeat. Now I don't know what to think, what to feel. Yes, you do. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. You're just scared to admit it. Shouldn't I be? Look what happened last time. Last time we let other people write our story. His other hand found her waist, drawing her closer. This time we write it ourselves. The rain fell harder, creating a private world on their sheltered deck. Kalia could feel herself swaying toward him, like a flower seeking sunlight. If we do this, she whispered, if we try again, everything changes. Not just for us. Maybe everything needs to change. His forehead rested against hers. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. The scent of his cologne enveloped her, familiar and new all at once. His hands were warm through the silk of her dress, anchoring her in this moment that felt suspended between past and future. "Jasper, tell me to stop," he murmured. "Tell me you don't feel this too, and I'll step away." But she couldn't. 7 years of practiced indifference melted like sugar in rain, leaving only the raw, honest truth. Some loves don't die. They just wait, dormant, for the right moment to bloom again. When his lips finally met hers, it felt like coming home, like finding a piece of herself she'd forgotten was missing. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. But when her hands slid up his chest to loop around his neck, it deepened into something more urgent, more real. The storm raged around them, but in their small corner of the world, everything was perfectly, beautifully still. When they finally broke apart, Kalia could see the same wonder in Jasper's eyes that she felt in her heart. "Stay," he whispered against her lips. "Not for, just stay. Talk with me. Watch the storm. Let me learn you again." She should say no, should walk away while her heart was still mostly intact. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "Okay." Later, curled on his couch with coffee and her raspberry chocolate cake, they talked for hours. About Europe and college, about dreams abandoned and new ones found, about all the little moments that had shaped them into the people they were now. And when the storm finally passed, leaving a star-filled sky in its wake, Kalia realized something fundamental had shifted. The careful walls she'd built around her heart had cracked, letting hope slip through like sunshine after rain. Maybe some stories don't end with goodbye. Maybe sometimes they just pause, waiting for the right moment to begin again. And maybe, just maybe, the sequel could be better than the original. The Whitmore mansion loomed against the morning sky like a storm cloud on the horizon. Jasper straightened his tie, more armor than accessory today, as he walked up the familiar limestone steps. The events of last night, Kalia's smile, the storm, that kiss, felt like a dream in the harsh light of day. But the warmth in his chest told him it had been real, all of it. Mr. Jasper, the housekeeper, Mrs. Porter, opened the door before he could knock. Her lined face carried worry. "Your father's in his study. He's been expecting you." Of course he had. Nothing happened in Willow Creek without Harrison Whitmore hearing about it. The study hadn't changed in 7 years. Still the same dark wood paneling, leather-bound books and heavy curtains that made the room feel more like a mausoleum than a workspace. His father stood at the window, back straight, hands clasped behind him, the perfect picture of authority. "I wondered how long it would take you to show up," Harrison said without turning around. "After your performance at the Henderson meeting yesterday." "It wasn't a performance." Jasper kept his voice level. "I meant every word." "Did you?" Now Harrison turned, his steel-grey eyes sharp. "Or was this latest rebellion inspired by your renewed interest in Richard Turner's daughter?" The way he said it, like Kalia was some passing fancy, a distraction, made Jasper's jaw clench. "I leave her out of this. I wish I could." Harrison moved to his desk, picking up a folder. "But it seems you've made that impossible. Dinner at the Grove, breakfast at Dawn's Edge, and now—" He dropped several photographs on the desk. "A rather lengthy evening at your new house." The images showed Kalia arriving at Jasper's home, then leaving early this morning. Nothing scandalous, but the implication was clear. They were being watched. "Are you having me followed?" "I'm protecting our family's interests." Harrison's voice softened slightly. "Son, I understand the appeal of revisiting the past, but you have responsibilities now. The Henderson merger is dead." Jasper stepped forward, gathering the photos. "And if you ever have Kalia followed again, you'll what?" His father's smile was cold. "Throw away your inheritance, your position in the company, everything we've built, if I have to, for a gardener's daughter." Harrison shook his head. "She doesn't belong in our world, Jasper. She never did. That's why we sent you away 7 years ago, and it's why you lied." Jasper's voice cracked like a whip. "Forged letters, manipulated 2 teenagers who just happened to fall in love." "Love," Harrison laughed. "You were 18. What did you know about love?" "Enough to know it was real." Jasper moved to leave and then paused. "And now I know enough to fight for it. Even if it costs you everything. Maybe it's time I decided what everything really means." He left his father standing in the study, anger radiating off him in waves. Outside, the summer morning had turned humid, promising another storm. Fitting, given the clouds gathering in his own life. Across town, Kalia was facing her own familial storm. "I saw you leaving his house this morning." Richard Turner's voice carried down the hallway of their small home as Kalia prepared for work. "People are talking, sweetheart. People always talk." She focused on applying her mascara, refusing to let her hand shake. "Nothing happened, Dad. Nothing." He appeared in her doorway, looking older than his years. "The whole town saw you two at the Grove. Victoria Henderson is telling everyone how you're trying to sabotage some big business deal, and now, spending the night at his place. We talked." Kalia set down her makeup brush. "About the past, about the lies." Richard's face fell. "He told you about the letter, about both letters." She turned to face him. "How could you, Dad? How could you make that choice for me? I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself." The words burst out before she could stop them. "You were so afraid of losing your job that you sacrificed my happiness." "Happiness?" Richard's voice rose. "You think you would have been happy watching him choose his family's expectations over you, watching him slowly resent you for holding him back? That wasn't your decision to make, wasn't it?" "I'm your father. Yes, my father." Kalia grabbed her purse, needing to escape. "Not my jailer." She made it halfway down the stairs before his next words stopped her. "Harrison Whitmore called me this morning." Kalia turned slowly. "What?" "He reminded me that I still work for him." Richard's voice was heavy. "That my contract includes the cottage we live in." The implications hit her like a physical blow. "He's threatening your job. Because of me and Jasper. He's expressing concern about our children repeating past mistakes." Richard smiled sadly. His words, not mine. Kalia felt the world tilting beneath her feet. 7 years ago, she'd been too young to understand the full scope of what their families had done to keep them apart. Now, seeing the web of power and manipulation clearly, she felt sick. "I have to go," she whispered, fleeing before her father could say more. The library usually brought her peace, but today its quiet corners felt stifling. Every patron's whispered conversation seemed to be about her, about Jasper, about the scandal brewing in their small town. Around noon, her phone buzzed with a text from Jasper. "Lunch, we need to talk." They met at a small deli on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes. One look at his face told her he'd had a morning similar to hers. "Your father's having us watched," he said without preamble, sliding into the booth across from her. "And yours is threatening my dad's job." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, seeking warmth despite the summer heat. "It's happening again, isn't it? They're trying to control us." "Only if we let them." Jasper reached across the table, taking her hand. "Kaylee, I meant what I said last night. I'm not that scared teenager anymore." "Neither am I." She squeezed his hand. "But I'm also not naive enough to think this won't hurt people we love. So what do we do? Give up? Walk away?" The pain in his voice echoed her own heart's protest at the thought. "I don't know." They sat in silence, hands linked, while their untouched sandwiches grew cold. Through the deli's window, Kalia watched clouds gathering again, nature mimicking their darkening mood. "I have an idea," Jasper said finally, "but you might think I'm crazy. Try me. Come away with me." His eyes blazed with intensity. "Not forever, just for a weekend. I have a cottage up in the mountains, about 3 hours from here. Let's get away from all this, figure out what we want without everyone else's voices in our heads." It was impulsive, reckless, exactly the kind of thing that would set tongues wagging in Willow Creek. But looking at him, at the man who'd come back for her, who was willing to fight his own family for a chance at what they'd lost, Kalia felt something shift in her chest. Okay. His surprise was almost comical. This weekend, she felt reckless, alive. Let's do it. Let's get away from everything and just be us. Figure out if what we feel is worth fighting for. His smile was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "Theus, I'll pick you up Friday after work." As they left the deli separately, another concession to their watchful families, Kalia felt equal parts terror and exhilaration. They were playing with fire, challenging the careful order of Willow Creek's social hierarchy. But maybe, she thought as she walked back to the library, some things were worth burning for. Some loves deserved a second chance, even if you had to fight the whole world to get it. And this time, they weren't scared teenagers hoping for approval. They were adults choosing their own path, come what may. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, rain washing the streets clean. Kalia turned her face to the sky, letting the drops mingle with tears she hadn't realized she was crying. Sometimes, she realized, the hardest part of love isn't fighting for. It's being brave enough to try again when the whole world seems determined to stop you. Friday evening arrived with golden light and the promise of freedom. Kalia stood at her bedroom window, watching for Jasper's car while her overnight bag sat ready on the bed. She'd chosen her clothes carefully, casual but pretty, including her favorite sundresses and the new swimsuit she'd bought on impulse, tags still attached. Her phone buzzed. 5 minutes away. Ready? Before she could reply, her father's voice carried up the stairs. Kalia, Victoria Henderson is here to see you. Her heart stopped. Victoria, here. She hurried downstairs to find the blonde socialite standing in their modest living room, looking utterly out of place in her designer outfit. Victoria, Kalia kept her voice neutral. This is unexpected. Is it? Victoria's perfect smile didn't reach her eyes. I thought we should talk woman to woman, about choices and consequences. Richard cleared his throat. I'll give you ladies privacy. Once they were alone, Victoria's smile dropped. You're planning to run away with him? It's just a weekend trip, Kalia corrected, though her pulse raced. How did you... Please. Victoria waved a manicured hand. This is Willow Creek. Besides, Jasper's been making arrangements, booking a luxury cabin. Not very discreet. What do you want? To warn you. Victoria moved closer, her expensive perfume overwhelming in the small room. You're not just risking your own future now. Your father's job, his home, and Jasper, he stands to lose everything. The company, his inheritance, his reputation. Those aren't your concerns, aren't they? The merger between our families has been planned for years. Our fathers built their companies with this union in mind. Hundreds of jobs depend on it. Kalia felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Jasper doesn't want the merger. What Jasper wants isn't the point. Victoria's voice softened with false sympathy. He has obligations to his family, to his employees, to the community. Are you really selfish enough to make him choose between all that and, what, a childhood romance? Before Kalia could respond, headlights swept across the window. Jasper's car. Think about it, Victoria said, moving toward the door. If you really love him, you'll let him go again. She slipped out just as Jasper was coming up the walk. Kalia watched through the window as they passed each other, saw the tension in Jasper's shoulders, the triumphant tilt of Victoria's head. When Jasper entered, his face was dark with anger. What did she want? To remind me of my place. Kalia tried to smile. And yours. Hey. He crossed the room in 2 strides, taking her face in his hands. Don't let her get in your head. We're not doing anything wrong. But weren't they? Victoria's words echoed in her mind as Jasper loaded her bag into his car. They drove in silence through Willow Creek's darkening streets, past the familiar landmarks of their youth, now weighted with new significance. As they left the town limits, Jasper reached for her hand. Talk to me, Kaylee. What did Victoria really say? That I'm being selfish. The words tumbled out. And that I'm asking you to give up everything for what? A memory? Stop the car. What? Stop the car, Jasper, please. He pulled over onto a scenic overlook. Below them, Willow Creek's lights twinkled like earthbound stars. Above, the real stars were just beginning to emerge in the twilight sky. Jasper turned in his seat to face her. Listen to me. Everything they say I'm giving up. The merger, the inheritance, the perfect society marriage. Those were never my choices. They were plans other people made for me. But your family, my family needs to learn that I'm not a pawn in their game anymore. His voice was fierce with conviction. 7 years ago, they took my choice away. Took you away. I won't let that happen again. Even if it costs you everything. You keep saying that word. Everything. He smiled softly. So but what's everything worth if you're living someone else's life? The sincerity in his eyes made her throat tight. Here was the boy who used to dream with her under summer stars, grown into a man strong enough to fight for those dreams. Now, he said, starting the car again, are you ready for an adventure? The drive into the mountains took them away from civilization, up winding roads where trees pressed close and stars seemed brighter with each mile. When they finally turned onto a private drive, Kalia gasped. The cottage was a stunning modern structure of glass and stone, perched on the mountainside with a view that stretched forever. A wraparound deck featured a hot tub, and through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see a great room with a soaring fireplace. This is yours. Bought it last year, Jasper admitted. Parking. Needed somewhere to escape when the pressure got too much. Somewhere that was just mine. Inside, the house was warm and inviting despite its modern design. Jasper had arranged for groceries to be delivered, and soon they were cooking together in the gourmet kitchen, moving around each other with easy familiarity. "Remember when we used to sneak into the mansion's kitchen late at night?" Kalia asked, chopping vegetables while Jasper handled the pasta, and Mrs. Porter would pretend not to see us. He laughed. "She always left cookies out just in case. She knew about us, didn't she? She knew everything that happened in that house." His expression turned thoughtful. "Actually, she was the one who finally told me about the letters, said she couldn't retire with that secret weighing on her conscience." They ate on the deck, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. The tension from Victoria's visit slowly melted away, replaced by a peace Kalia hadn't felt in years. After dinner, they ended up in the hot tub, steam rising around them as stars appeared overhead. Kalia was grateful she'd packed that new swimsuit, especially given the way Jasper's eyes followed her movements. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his voice low and intimate in the mountain quiet. "That this feels like a dream." She leaned her head back, looking at the stars. "Like any minute I'll wake up back in my small life with my careful walls, and all of this will fade away." "Not a dream." He moved closer, water rippling around them, "but maybe a new beginning." When he kissed her this time, there was no storm to blame, no past to hide behind. Just them, choosing each other under a canopy of stars. Later, wrapped in plush robes in front of the fireplace, they talked about everything and nothing, about their dreams, their fears, the people they'd become in their time apart. "I have a confession," Jasper said, playing with her fingers where they rested on his chest. "I almost came back 3 years ago." "What stopped you?" "Fear." His voice was quiet. "Fear that you'd moved on, found someone else, that I'd lost my chance." "I dated," she admitted. "So nothing serious. They all felt wrong somehow, like I was trying to fill a space that could only ever belong to one person." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We lost so much time. Maybe we needed it." She turned to face him. "To become people strong enough to fight for what we want." "And what do you want, Kylie?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Outside, an owl called into the night, its cry echoing off the mountains. "I want to stop being afraid," she whispered. "Stop letting other people write my story. I want—" "What?" "You." The word was both a confession and a promise. "Us, whatever that means, whatever it costs. I want to be brave enough to choose love." His kiss was different this time, deeper, filled with 7 years of longing and newfound determination. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, his eyes were dark with emotion. "Then let's be brave together." They fell asleep on the oversized couch, tangled together as the fire burned low. Just before she drifted off, Kalia thought about Victoria's warning, about all the obstacles waiting for them back in Willow Creek. But here, in this moment, with Jasper's heartbeat steady under her cheek and the mountains standing guard outside, none of that seemed to matter. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit what your heart has known all along, that some loves are worth any price, and some battles are worth fighting, even if the whole world stands against you. The stars wheeled overhead, witnesses to a love that refused to die, that grew stronger in darkness, that dared to bloom again despite every attempt to uproot it. And in the quiet of the mountain night, 2 hearts finally found their way home. Sunday afternoon brought them back to reality, with all the gentleness of a thunderclap. As Jasper's car crossed the Willow Creek town limits, both their phones exploded with notifications, missed calls, text messages, and voicemails that had been held at bay by the mountain's poor reception. 14 missed calls from my father," Jasper muttered, pulling into Kalia's driveway. And, "Is that your father standing on the porch?" Richard Turner paced the worn wooden boards, his weathered face tight with worry. When Kalia stepped out of the car, he rushed forward. "Inside. Now." His voice brooked no argument. "Both of you." They followed him into the small living room, where the local newspaper lay spread on the coffee table. The headline made Kalia's blood run cold. "Whitmore heir abandons family business. Sources say romance behind shocking decision." Below was a photo of them at Dawn's Edge Cafe, followed by another of their mountain getaway, the timestamp showing their arrival Friday night. The article was filled with quotes from anonymous sources discussing the Henderson merger, Jasper's responsibilities, and thinly veiled implications about Kalia's motives. "But it gets worse," Richard said, picking up his tablet. He pulled up the Willow Creek Business Journal's website, where another headline screamed, "Henderson Industries withdraws from merger. Stock prices plummet. They're blaming me," Kalia whispered, sinking onto the couch. They're making it look like you seduced the heir to destroy a business deal. Jasper's voice was hard with anger. Toika, this has Victoria written all over it. This isn't about Victoria, Richard snapped. This is about consequences. Real ones. The Whitmore Corporation's stock has dropped 15% since Friday. People's retirement funds, their savings. That's not Kalia's fault, Jasper interrupted. I made my decision about the merger weeks ago, but now they have someone to blame. Richard sat heavily in his armchair. And it's not going to be the Whitmore heir. As if on cue, Jasper's phone rang, his father's number flashing on the screen. He answered on speaker, his jaw set. Where the hell are you? Harrison Whitmore's voice filled the room. Do you have any idea what's happening? I'm with Kalia, Jasper replied calmly. And yes, I've seen the papers. Then get to the office, now. The board is meeting in an hour, and you need to make a statement. We can still salvage this if what, father? If I deny everything, throw Kalia to the wolves. If you act like the heir you were raised to be. Harrison's voice cracked with frustration. This isn't about some girl. This is about thousands of people whose livelihoods depend on our company's stability. Kalia stood abruptly. Go, Kali. Go to the meeting, Jasper. She met his eyes steadily. Your father's right about one thing. This isn't just about us anymore. For a moment he looked like he might refuse. Then his shoulders squared with determination. Come with me. What? Come to the board meeting. Let them see the truth. Not Victoria's lies or my father's manipulation. Just us, standing together. Through the phone, Harrison's voice turned cold. This is a closed board meeting. Ms. Turner is not welcome. Then I'm not coming either. Jasper's tone matched his father's. You want a statement? Fine. We'll make one together. The truth, all of it. He ended the call, leaving silence in its wake. Richard stared at them both like they'd lost their minds. You can't be serious, he said finally. Kalia, sweetheart, think about what you're doing. But Kalia was already moving, running upstairs to change. She emerged 10 minutes later in her most professional outfit, a navy sheath dress and modest heels, her curls tamed into a sleek bun. I'm done hiding, she said, taking Jasper's offered hand. Done letting them write our story. The drive to Whitmore Corporation's headquarters was tense with anticipation. As they pulled into the parking lot, news vans were already gathering, reporters drawn by the scent of scandal. Ready? Jasper asked softly. Kalia squeezed his hand. Together, they walked into the building side by side, ignoring the camera flashes and shouted questions. In the elevator, Jasper's cologne mixed with her daisy perfume, creating a scent that was uniquely them, a small detail that somehow gave her courage. The boardroom fell silent as they entered. Harrison Whitmore stood at the head of the table, his face darkening at the sight of them. Victoria Henderson sat to his right, her perfect composure slipping for just a moment. This is a private meeting, Harrison began, but Jasper cut him off. No more private meetings, no more backroom deals. He turned to address the board directly. You want to know why I withdrew from the merger? Why our stock is falling? Look to your chairman. Ask him about forged letters 7 years ago. So about manipulating his own son for business advantages. This is ridiculous, Victoria stood. We're here to discuss the company's future, not your romantic drama. The company's future, Kalia found her voice, or your carefully arranged marriage plans. A murmur went through the board members. An elderly man at the far end cleared his throat. What letters? He asked. What manipulation? So they told them. Everything. The teenage romance. The forged letters, the forced separation. How Harrison had used his son's departure to pressure the Hendersons into merger talks. How Victoria's father had leveraged the possibility of marriage to secure better terms. I have copies, Jasper said, pulling out his phone, of both the real and forged letters, of emails discussing the marriage merger strategy, of everything. This is absurd, Harrison sputtered, but the damage was done. Board members were whispering, passing phones, reading evidence that had been hidden for 7 years. The merger was never about business synergy, Jasper continued. It was about control, about forcing two companies together through personal manipulation. That's why I withdrew, not because of Kalia, but because it was wrong. And the stock drop? Someone asked. Engineered, Jasper replied coolly. Check the trading records. Large sell-offs from Henderson-controlled accounts. Time to coincide with planted news stories. They're trying to force my hand through market pressure. Victoria's composure finally cracked. You can't prove that. Actually, a new voice spoke from the doorway. He can. Mrs. Porter, the Whitmores' longtime housekeeper, stood there holding a thick folder. I've worked for this family for 30 years, seen everything, kept every document, every memo, every email I was asked to dispose of, including instructions for today's coordinated stock sale. The boardroom erupted in chaos. Harrison tried to call for order, but his authority was already crumbling. In the confusion, Jasper pulled Kalia close. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for dragging you into this. I chose to be here," she reminded him. "We chose this, together." As the board members argued and accused, as Harrison faced the consequences of years of manipulation, as Victoria stormed out in elegant defeat, Kalia and Jasper stood united. The storm they'd feared had finally broken, but they were weathering it side by side, and somehow, standing in the midst of corporate chaos in her simple navy dress, Kalia felt more powerful than Victoria Henderson had ever been in her designer suits. Because she was standing up not just for love, but for truth. When they finally left the building hours later, the sun was setting over Willow Creek. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, investigations, reorganizations, more media coverage. But for now, they had each other, and the knowledge that their love had not only survived the storm, but grown stronger because of it. "Take me home," Kalia asked, exhausted but proud. Jasper smiled, understanding in his eyes. Always, as they drove through the familiar streets, past the places where their story had begun and begun again, Kalia realized something profound. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about grand gestures or perfect moments. They're about choosing each other again and again, even when the whole world seems to stand against you. And sometimes, just sometimes, those choices change not just two lives, but an entire town's understanding of what love can overcome. The week following the board meeting brought changes that rippled through Willow Creek like waves in a still pond. Harrison Whitmore had been forced to step down as CEO, pending an investigation, replaced temporarily by the board's senior member. Victoria Henderson and her family had retreated to their summer home in the Hamptons, leaving only whispers and speculation in their wake. But for Kalia, the biggest changes were the small ones. "I never thought I'd see this," she mused, watching her father work alongside the new landscaping crew in the Whitmore Gardens. After the truth came out, the board had reviewed all company practices, including the unfair wages paid to long-term workers like Richard Turner. Now he was the head groundskeeper, with a proper salary and a team under his supervision. "He earned it," Jasper said, joining her at the garden window. They all did. They stood in what had once been Harrison's study, now Jasper's temporary office while the company restructured. The heavy curtains had been removed, letting in natural light. Fresh flowers, arranged by Richard himself, brightened the once austere space. "The board meets again tomorrow," Jasper continued, his hand finding hers, "to discuss the company's new direction. Are you nervous?" "Terrified." His smile was wry, but also excited. "For the first time, I feel like I can actually make a difference, build something worthwhile." Kalia squeezed his hand, understanding. The past week had been a whirlwind of meetings, interviews, and decisions. Jasper had thrown himself into reforming his family's company, determined to transform it into something more ethical, more community-focused. Ms. Turner, Jasper's new assistant, poked her head in. "The library board is here for your meeting." "Right." That meeting, Kalia smoothed her skirt, suddenly nervous. After the truth about the Whitmores and Hendersons had come out, several community organizations had approached her about joining their boards. The library, with its need for modernization and community outreach, felt like the perfect fit. "You'll be amazing," Jasper assured her, pressing a quick kiss to her temple. "Go change their world." The meeting went better than she'd expected. Her ideas for expanded programs, digital resources, and collaborative spaces were met with enthusiasm. When she mentioned the possibility of corporate sponsorship for free literacy programs, the board practically vibrated with excitement. Afterward, walking through downtown Willow Creek, Kalia was struck by how differently people looked at her now, not with judgment or pity, but with respect. She'd stood up to the town's most powerful families and emerged stronger. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jasper. "Dinner tonight. Have news." They met at Dawn's Edge Cafe, their spot, now and always. The evening light painted the lake in shades of gold, and the air was sweet with approaching autumn. "So," she said, settling into their usual table, "what's the news?" Jasper looked uncharacteristically nervous. The board approved my proposal. We're restructuring the company, creating a charitable foundation, implementing ethical business practices across all divisions. Jasper, that's wonderful. There's more? He took her hand across the table. They want to open a new headquarters. In Boston. The words hung in the air between them. Boston. 3 hours away. A different world. Oh. Kalia tried to keep her voice steady. When would you leave? That depends on you. Me? Jasper's thumb traced patterns on her palm. The library board in Boston is looking for someone to oversee a major modernization project. Someone with fresh ideas and community experience. I might have mentioned your name. Kalia's heart skipped. You want me to come with you? I want you to consider it. Only if you want to. Only if it fits your dreams too. He leaned forward. Earnest. We could start fresh, Kaylee. Build something new together. But my father, the house... Your father's position is secure, contractually protected now. And as for the house, Jasper smiled. I thought maybe we could keep my lake house here, come back on weekends, holidays, keep our roots while growing new branches. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. Leave Willow Creek. The town had been her whole world for so long. But looking at Jasper, seeing the future in his eyes, she realized something. Home wasn't always a place. I'd need to think about it, she said carefully. Talk to my dad, the library board here. Of course. Take all the time you need. He squeezed her hand. I just want you to know that wherever I go, whatever I do next, I want you beside me. Not behind me. Not in my shadow. But right there beside me. Partners. The word partners echoed in her heart. How far they'd come from the teenagers who had to hide their love in gardens and secret meetings. Tell me about Boston, she found herself saying. About your plans for the company, for the foundation. They talked for hours, their coffee growing cold as they wove dreams together. About programs they could create, communities they could help, the difference they could make together. As night fell, they walked along the lake, following the path they'd walked countless times before. But this time felt different. Not an ending, but a beginning. Remember when we used to dream about getting out of Willow Creek? Kalia asked, leaning into his side. How it seemed impossible then. Nothing's impossible anymore. Jasper stopped, turning to face her. These past few weeks proved that we fought the impossible and won. He was right. They'd faced down corporate giants, family expectations, and years of manipulation. They'd chosen love over fear, truth over comfort, growth over stagnation. We did, didn't we? She smiled up at him, seeing both the boy she'd first loved and the man who'd fought to find his way back to her. And we're just getting started. His eyes sparkled with promise. Fight if you want to be. Standing there by the lake where their story began, Kalia felt the last pieces of her careful walls crumble away. The future stretched before them, unknown, but full of possibility. Yes, she whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. Yes to Boston, to partners, to everything. His arms wrapped around her, lifting her off her feet as he deepened the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the stars were emerging above them. We should tell our families, she said, practical even in this moment of joy. Tomorrow. Jasper pulled her close again. Tonight, let's just be us. No families, no companies, no plans. Just us and the stars. They stayed by the lake until the moon rose, talking about dreams both old and new, and if anyone in Willow Creek saw them there, the heir and the librarian, planning their escape, they kept it to themselves. Because sometimes love stories don't end where they begin. Sometimes they lead you to new horizons, new adventures, new ways of being brave. And sometimes, just sometimes, they lead you exactly where you were always meant to be, not in the place you started, but in the arms of the person who helps you become who you were always meant to be. 3 months later, autumn painted Willow Creek in shades of gold and crimson. The morning air was crisp with the promise of change, as Kalia stood in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by boxes labeled Boston, and memories of a life she was preparing to leave behind. You don't have to do this, you know, her father said from the doorway. The library board here would give you anything to make you stay. Kalia smiled, touching the acceptance letter from the Boston Public Library system that lay on her dresser. I know, but sometimes growing means leaving. Richard crossed the room, picking up a framed photo of a younger Kalia in the Whitmore Gardens. I spent so many years trying to protect you from heartbreak, trying to keep you safe in our small world. But you've grown into someone so much stronger than I ever imagined. Because of you, Dad. She hugged him tight. You taught me the value of hard work, of standing up for what's right. I'm just finally brave enough to do it on a bigger scale. A car horn honked outside. Jasper, right on time as always. Through the window, Kalia could see him leaning against his car, looking unfairly handsome in a casual sweater and jeans. These days, he rarely wore suits unless he had to. Ready for the town meeting, he called up when she opened the window. Last chance to change your mind, she called back, teasing. His laugh carried on the autumn breeze. Never. The town hall was packed when they arrived. It seemed all of Willow Creek had turned out for what the local paper was calling the meeting that would change everything. Jasper took the podium first, his presence commanding attention without effort. 7 years ago, I left Willow Creek thinking I knew what success meant, he began. I thought it was about power, about living up to other people's expectations. I was wrong. His eyes found Kalia's in the crowd as he continued. Real success isn't about stock prices or mergers. It's about building something meaningful, something that makes a difference. He outlined the plans they'd spent months developing. The Whitmore Turner Foundation for Education and Community Development, the company's new ethical business practices, the partnership with local businesses to create job training programs. And yes, he smiled, we'll be operating primarily from Boston, but our heart will always be here in Willow Creek. This town taught us both what matters most, that love, truth, and courage can change not just 2 lives, but an entire community. When it was Kalia's turn to speak, she felt none of the nervousness she'd expected. The library was my sanctuary growing up, she began, a place where a gardener's daughter could dream bigger than her circumstances. Now, through the Foundation's educational initiatives, we'll help other dreamers find their way. She announced the scholarship program they were establishing, the digital learning center that would connect Willow Creek students with opportunities worldwide, the adult education programs that would help workers adapt to changing industries. We're not leaving Willow Creek behind, she concluded. We're helping it grow with us. The applause was thunderous. Even Mrs. Henderson, who'd returned from the Hamptons minus her daughter, nodded approvingly. Harrison Whitmore, seated quietly in the back, looked years older but somehow more human than Kalia had ever seen him. After the meeting, as people mingled and discussed the changes ahead, Jasper pulled Kalia onto the town hall's small balcony. The October sunset painted the sky in colors that reminded her of new beginnings. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket. I've been carrying it around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. The ring he held out was nothing like the ostentatious rocks Victoria used to wear. It was elegant and unique, a vintage-style setting holding not a diamond, but a deep blue sapphire surrounded by tiny stars. Jasper, she breathed. I'm not asking because we're moving to Boston, he said quickly, or because of the Foundation or any of that. I'm asking because 7 years ago, I made the mistake of letting others choose my path. Now I'm choosing you, us, our future together. He knelt, there on the balcony where they could hear the excited chatter of their town below. Kalia Turner, will you be my partner in everything? In changing the world, in building dreams, in loving completely? Will you marry me? Tears blurred her vision, but her voice was clear and strong. Yes, to everything. Always. Yes. The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, like it had been waiting there all along. When he kissed her, she tasted joy and promise, and a love that had grown stronger through every test. Inside, someone, probably her father, started clapping. Soon, the whole town hall had erupted in cheers, because that was Willow Creek, a place where even the most private moments became community celebrations, but this time, neither of them minded. Later that night, they sat on the deck of Jasper's lake house, soon to be their weekend retreat, watching stars emerge above the water. The autumn air was cool enough for blankets and hot chocolate, making everything feel cozy and perfect. You know what I just realized, Kalia said, admiring how her ring caught the starlight. Sammy never did get that clean break they wanted, never did forget each other or move on. Thank God for that. Jasper pulled her closer. Some loves aren't meant to break. They're meant to bend, to grow, to transform into something even stronger. She thought about everything that had changed. Her father's newfound confidence as head groundskeeper, the town's excitement about the Foundation's plans, Harrison's quiet steps toward redemption, her own journey from careful librarian to someone brave enough to chase bigger dreams. We did it, didn't we? She marveled. We actually changed things. We're just getting started. His voice held all the promise of tomorrow. Think about it. This is only the beginning of our story, and he was right. Because the best love stories don't end with happily ever after. They evolve, grow, face new challenges and celebrate new victories. They inspire others to be brave, to fight for what matters, to believe in the power of love to transform not just two hearts, but entire worlds. As the moon rose over Willow Creek, casting silver light on the lake where their story began, Kalia and Jasper held each other close. Tomorrow would bring packing boxes and moving plans, foundation meetings and library programs, 1,000 small steps toward their bigger dreams. But tonight was for them, for the love that had survived 7 years, family interference, corporate schemes, and their own fears, for the future they would build together, not as heir and librarian, but as partners in every sense. And somewhere in the distance, a new storm was gathering, not one to fear, but one that would water the seeds of change they'd planted. Because sometimes the most powerful force for transformation isn't rebellion or revolution. Sometimes it's simply love, choosing itself over and over again, until the whole world has no choice but to change around it. Kalia snuggled deeper into Jasper's embrace, her ring glinting like a captured star. Above them, the real stars wheeled in their ancient dance, witnesses to a love story that had become so much more, a story of courage, of growth, of two hearts brave enough to fight for their own happiness and, in doing so, change their corner of the world for the better. And in the end, that was the greatest, happily ever after, of all. The end, 2 years later. The Willow Creek Summer Festival lights twinkled against the twilight sky, strung between trees that had witnessed countless love stories unfold beneath their branches. The lake reflected the golden glow, creating a magical atmosphere that made everything feel possible. Kalia adjusted her simple white dress, not a traditional wedding gown, but perfect for a ceremony that was anything but traditional. Around her, the town had gathered in their finest, seated on white chairs arranged in the same garden where she and Jasper had first fallen in love as teenagers. "Ready, sweetheart?" Richard Turner asked, looking dapper in his new suit. His eyes glistened with pride as he offered his arm. They'd chosen to marry here, not in Boston where they now lived, because some stories need to end where they began, or rather begin again where they first started. The Whitmore Turner Foundation's success had exceeded everyone's expectations. Their educational programs had already helped dozens of students achieve their dreams. The library's digital learning center had become a model for small towns across the country, and their weekend retreats to the lake house had become legendary among their Boston friends, a perfect blend of their new life and their roots. As Kalia walked down the aisle, she saw familiar faces everywhere. Mrs. Porter, who had retired but insisted on helping plan the wedding. Harrison Whitmore, standing quietly near the back, his face softened by time and redemption. Even Victoria Henderson had sent a surprisingly warm congratulatory note from London, where she'd found her own path running an international art gallery, but none of that mattered when she saw Jasper waiting for her under the flower-covered arch. He still wore that same Sauvage cologne, still looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever had. His eyes lit up as she approached, and in them she saw their whole story, past, present, and future. The ceremony was short but meaningful. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising not just love and faithfulness, but partnership, courage, and the determination to keep choosing each other every day. "I gave you my heart when we were just kids in this garden," Jasper said, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "Every day since then has just been me finding new ways to choose you all over again. You taught me that love isn't about fitting into someone else's world," Kalia responded, squeezing his hands. "It's about building our own together." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, the festival fireworks began right on cue, painting the sky in celebration. Their guests cheered, but the newlyweds barely noticed, lost in their own private moment of joy. Later, during their first dance, Jasper pulled her close and whispered, "Ready for the next chapter." Kalia smiled, thinking of the pregnancy test she'd taken that morning, their own little miracle, already writing the next part of their story. But that news could wait. For now, she just wanted to dance with her husband under the stars that had witnessed their love grow from secret meetings to something strong enough to change worlds. "With you," she whispered back, "always." Above them, the stars sparkled like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Below, the lake rippled with possibilities, and all around them, Their town, their foundation, their inspiration, their beginning and their forever, celebrated not just a wedding, but the power of love to transform, heal, and create something beautiful from life's greatest challenges. Because in the end, that's what the best love stories do. They remind us that happy endings aren't endings at all. They're just new beginnings in disguise. And if you were in Kalia's or Jasper's shoes, would you have the courage to face an entire town, family and traditions for a love that has been separated for 7 years? Imagine yourself having to choose between your stability, career, and the expectations of everyone around you versus the chance to rescue a love from the past that never really died. Would you be brave enough to risk everything, knowing that your decision would affect not only your life, but that of many other people? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.